Hey guys, what's happening? So with getting started, I just want to say thank you to everyone from Discord and from here, because recently I've been dealing with some pretty heavy family stuff, so the uploads may be here and there, as they have been for a while pretty much. So I just wanted to tell you guys thank you for all the prayers, the support, and kind of pulling me into a place that feels somewhat normal with everything going on. And with that said, I got a bit of catching up to do. And with jumping back into pretty much everything, I wanted to start off with Miles Morales' Spider-Man. And for the record, just finished the game yesterday and it was really good. And I'm not amongst those who got their hands on the PS5, so I haven't played it on PS5, but I still very much enjoyed it on the PS4. But with picking up from where we left off with Miles Morales' Spider-Man, which really at this point in the series is more so heavily focusing on Miles rather than the Spider-Man. And really it's something that we've seen a number of times with different superheroes, with the balance between life and being a hero. And for whatever reason, at least to me, I always feel like it usually resonates or feels more believable in the case of Spider-Man. And initially with Peter Parker, but over time we've kind of seen the same formula implemented with Miles Morales. And really I think it just works best for them because they broke. And I mean, I'm laughing, but I'm serious, because it's a little different when somebody says, okay, just do something real heroic, be brave and heroic with $1 billion in your bank account. And it's kind of crazy even using that example with Batman right now, because he's kind of come to the place to where he has to figure it out without powers and without the billions. But in the case of your typical story of any Spider-Man, the limitation of resources is what defines them. Because without being the strongest or fastest or even the richest, but rather it's doing what you can with what you got and figuring out the rest as you go. But also as we pick back up with this series, there's quite a few things that Saladin Ahmed selectively brings back in this new run that'll draw directly from Bendis, but this time flipped with the intention of going for a much longer series. And I'll just point those things out as we go deeper in. But in the case of Miles, with him attending Brooklyn Visions Academy and balancing the life of being a hero, which recently took him on an investigation with Rhino and Captain America, which he was doing on top of being your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, but because of this his attendance in school then took a hit, and as a result his vice principal Dutcher, he then took it upon himself to be like, I'm gonna figure this out, I'm gonna catch this kid because he's just skipping school playing hooky. Which usually isn't the case, but on this particular Friday, it kinda was, because the night before, Miles' doormate Judge, he had invited Miles out to an event called The Brief History of Brooklyn Hip Hop that was being held at the Brooklyn Museum that ended that same day, or rather that following day on that Friday. And initially Miles is like he's not gonna go because he know he get in huge trouble with his parents, and Genki, he's not going because he's actually sick, like he's got an ear infection, so he's not gonna be at school the next day. But Miles, he gets suckered into it because his crush at the time, Barbara, she was invited by Judge as well, and that was kind of the tipping point that convinced Miles to go, because otherwise he wouldn't have done it. And so now the next day, as far as sneaking off of campus, like Judge and Barbara, they don't know that Miles is Spider-Man, so when he sneaks away from them for a quick second, he goes camouflage, he distracts the security guard, and then they're on their way. And it's a bit of a risky move because like it kind of gives away who did it. And even though I'm sure the camouflage slash invisible thing was done by Venom first, but fast forward to now, nobody really thinks about it, because when they see it now they're like, oh, that's Spider-Man, and not the red and blue but the black and red one. But while they're on their way to the museum on the subway, Barbara's like, check out my mixtape, tell me what you think, and Miles checks it out, but he gonna say it's nice either way because he's trying to get with her. And so when she starts to play it for him, they start to have this moment. But before anything happens, the train nearly derails, and though it seems kind of random, it's actually tied to what was going on in Avengers at the time as a result of Namor and an attack from Atlantis. So Miles kind of just uses the commotion to say that he was pushed to the middle of the car so that then he could just get lost in the crowd and use his camouflage and jump out and stop the train from actually derailing, which in this case works as a better cover-up, because after he just meets back up with them, it was like, whoa, we're lucky that Spider-Man came through. And it's like, even if they didn't see him, he'd just be like, well, you know that he be turning invisible sometimes, man, you know how it go. So it's like, it's a huge help that he's able to play it off with the camouflage in these situations, like when he's out with friends. But in this case, when they make it to the Brooklyn Museum and the power goes out, then he's able to just jump up in the corner and change clothes. But I'm gonna tell you right now, like, had this not been a series of like different things going on, because really this series is like a relaunch of Miles Morales, reintroducing us into his life and then getting into the serious stuff later on. But even during these earlier moments, I can't help but think of the practical, because if this was a situation to where the power had really just went out and then the lights had came right back on, there would have been some little kid that would have looked up in the corner and been like, oh my god, Spider-Man ate somebody and webbed their clothes to the wall, we're all gonna die. But in this case, it was a dude named the Frost Sparrow, and this is a guy who needs no introduction. because he doesn't matter. And Miles really doesn't take this dude that serious either. And he lets him know like there weren't no blonde people in ancient Egypt, and I don't care what you think you saw with Gerard Butler and Jaime Lannister, but it ain't going out like that. But even aside from that, like Miles has seen the real deal as far as villains go, and for the most part he just ends it quick because he's trying to get back to the rest of his day. But even still, it's like the common fight rule, like even with the least worthy opponent, you don't just give him time to get lucky. And if you can end it in the first couple rounds, that's what you do. But when Miles gets back to Barbara and Judge, they're a bit suspicious about his disappearance, and rightfully so, because that's just a realistic reaction. And really it's at this part where I think of something that was really overlooked like when this series first started off, because for one, I'm with the popular opinion that Frost Sparrow was whack, but at this point like the villains aren't really what Saladin is focusing on, because Saladin Ahmed, with writing this series, he's establishing something that Miles has never really had, which is like your uninterrupted world building treatment. Because for Miles, we have seen the school thing, we've seen him dating Kate Bishop in the 1610 universe, which ended weird with the whole Hydra thing, but as far as his standalone world building treatment, it's always had its interruptions, whether it was Cataclysm, Time Runs Out, Secret Wars, or even in the cases where we did get stories about Miles Morales, they didn't veer too far from his association with Peter Parker, and when they did, there weren't too many characters that were created as a byproduct of the narrative around Miles, with the exception of his family, Genki, and Judge. And back at that time, everyone else was more so a spin-off of a character who already existed in the main continuity. But in this series, he's taken the shot at giving Miles Morales like a deeper look into his own life, more development into the characters around him, and eventually the development of Miles having his own rogues gallery instead of always running into people from Peter's rogues gallery. And of course, with doing that, like in the beginning, a lot of Peter's allies and villains, they'll show up in Miles Morales Spider-Man, but the ultimate goal is to have Miles Morales and just the characters from his series brought up to the level to where they can hold their own and not need a big feature jumping through in every other issue. But in the beginning, there's a lot of groundwork, a lot of new character development, which will hopefully lead to beyond like 40 issues and hopefully to like 100 plus and even beyond, because at that point then you'll be able to have the deeper stakes after establishing who's back, who's new, and what exactly Miles' new world is after he had pretty much got a brand new start since the conclusion of Secret Wars. But from here, jumping back to the dorm room, Vice Principal Dutcher, he tries to pop up and catch Miles skipping class, and at this time Genki, who's still there, who's actually sick, he tries to stall like Miles asleep, give me some time to wake him up, but then the whole situation is kind of saved by Principal Evans, who pulls Vice Principal Dutcher away because they were supposed to be heading over to the Department of Education, which fortunately causes them to leave the campus to head to this meeting. But then after the meeting, they're held up in traffic on the way back because of everything that had just taken place at the museum, and when he hears that Spider-Man saved everyone at the museum, then he's just like, oh, Spider-Man's great. He sets an example, and bad apples like Miles, they could learn a thing or two from him. And this dives into much more, which we'll get to later on this playlist, but it really just goes to show you like the example of with Miles being Spider-Man and having to show up in one persona, and it really just makes the other look like a deadbeat. And really, I feel like that's one of the things that any hero or really any person can relate to, because you could be someone that does great with work and then your family life sucks because of it, or you could be trying to do more with family, but then on the other hand, your work takes a hit as a result. And it could be really difficult to balance the two if like you're passionate about both. And that's really where we also see Miles struggle here, because he wants to hang out with Judge, he wants to connect with Barbara, and though skipping school is not really like the ideal way to execute that, we do see that he's trying different things and trying to figure things out, whether these decisions be right or wrong. But at this point, while Miles is at the theater, he gets a text from Genki where he lets Miles know like everyone has to get back because the vice principal has stopped by earlier and it's only a matter of time before he gets back. And with hearing that, there's this very Ferris Bueller moment to where Miles, Barbara, and Judge, they gotta make their way back to the campus, and with doing so, they rent out like the little relay bikes, which is more of a city thing, to where you put some money in, you ride it to where you need to go, and then you park it at another one of the little stops or tolls or whatever. But in their case, this is like the quickest way back. But even with them doing this, the principal and the vice principal, they're stuck in traffic and also making their way back to Brooklyn Visions. Like, had either one of them looked up like just a second sooner, like all of them would have been busted. But even still, it works out like just in the nick of time, like just like Ferris Bueller, and they're able to sneak back in the dorm room and act like they've been asleep, so that when Vice Principal Dutcher opens the door, both Miles and Judge are already in there. But in this case, I think that Judge, he's truly slumped. Like, just from pedaling full speed from the theater all the way back to the campus. So with Dutcher walking in here, like, Judge, he's really selling it in this moment. But aside from this, like, the next morning, like that Saturday morning, we see Miles filling in new entries for his journal, which as we've seen so far is part of his project for his creative writing class. But as he catches up with his work and puts in this new entry, he makes the addition of what happened at the museum, with him saving the day and getting hit with that cold beam by Frost Pharaoh, which actually made him sick for like 2 minutes, but it added a bit of truth to the events that had taken place as he logged them in his journal, that collectively as a project is supposed to help him balance everything with life. And ideally, this journal is supposed to be something that not even the instructor is going to read, or supposedly anyone else for that matter, but it's supposed to act as a tool to help individuals or organization and improve each student in other areas. But we'll see how long that exclusivity lasts. And so now real quick before we go, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. And as far as like any updates with my situation, I'll keep you guys in the loop as much as I can over on Discord. So keep an eye over there for any updates. And once again, just thank you to everybody for all the love and support and everything, man. I really appreciate it. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And let me know if you got a chance to play the new Miles Morales too. But that'll do it for this one. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Alright, later.